I want to know what the filter is that they use on like the Real Housewives of Orange County, because those people are just like way too smooth. I don't know what's going on there. What's shaking, bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography. So if you're into that, you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And today we're talking about filters, but I'm not talking about Instagram filters or any filters that make you look all fuzzy and fabulous. We are talking about the kind of filters you put on the front of your lens, which are helpful for all sorts of situations. So if you have ever wanted to know how to use these, what's the purpose of them, why do you need to buy one? Well, you go ahead and stick around. So if you've never used filters before, there is a good chance at least that you're familiar with them. If you've ever bought a lens online and you see there are recommended accessories with it, usually they'll say, hey, add this to your shopping cart. And you say, I know what you're trying to do, B&H, you're just trying to get me to spend more money. But in reality, these are actually really helpful tools, but you gotta know which ones to buy, what to do, what's important to know before you purchase one. So first things first, what are the different kinds of filters? Well, there are ND filters, UV filters, and polarizing filters. For me here in the studio, I don't usually use ND filters. I actually don't own one because generally the concept with an ND filter is that it is blocking the amount of light coming into the lens. And you might say, well, Joni, I never want to like limit the amount of light. I always need more light. And that's pretty true for us as food photographers, generally shooting indoors. But for folks who are shooting outdoors or in situations where you need to be able to limit the amount of light coming into the lens, an ND or a neutral density filter is great for that. But again, not really something I use here in the studio. I more often am using a UV filter or a polarizing filter. So both of these filters, what they do is you purchase the one that is specific in terms of size for the lens that it is supposed to go on, right? Because the size of just the actual circle here that is the lens, it needs to match up. Because there is threading on this that then you can screw into it. Screw it right on to the front of the lens. And all filters, no matter what, will always protect your lens. So if you have this big, beautiful lens that you spent an arm and a leg on, and you don't want it to get food that you're throwing around the studio or drinks or whatever, you want to be able to protect that glass, you go ahead and throw a filter in front of it. And that is pretty much the only reason I ever use UV filters, because UV filters, you can see this one that I've just put on here, are completely clear, right? They're not dark, they're not impacting my image. Now, one thing to bear in mind though is because this is going in front of our lens and we paid a lot of money for some good glass on that lens. So how sad would it be to cheap out on your filter and get an inexpensive filter with bad glass that then is ultimately going to impact your image? So it is worth spending some good money on a good filter if you're going to use them. You don't have to use filters, definitely not like a required thing, but for me, I just like to protect my lenses, and so throwing a good quality filter over the front of it is gonna be helpful for the longevity of that lens. And then the other kind of filter, which is super duper helpful in situations where you're shooting shiny things or things with a lot of glare and reflection, then you're gonna want a polarizing filter. And we talked about this last week in the video all about shooting drinks. And so this does the same exact thing, just in terms of attaching to your lens, wanting something that's high quality, that's gonna be the proper size for the lens that it's going on. But you can see just on visual inspection, a polarizing filter is different than a UV filter because it's darker. And so what a polarizing filter does is that it is blocking certain wavelengths of light. I kind of think of a polarizing filter, this might be a bad analogy, but I kind of think of it like blinds that you've got hanging on a window, that it is blocking certain wavelengths of light from reflecting back up into your camera while still allowing others to come through. And it works the best when the light is coming in from a 90-degree angle from the position of your camera. So if you have your camera pointed at the subject, the light is coming in at a 90-degree angle, and then you just start to twist the filter, and what it will do is it will match up with different wavelengths of light and start to block them, and you will start to see then those highlights, those bright spots, that glare start to disappear. So it's just like Legally Blonde, right? But it's twist and block, twist, and blah. You'll also notice with a polarizing filter, as you start to adjust that and see how it impacts the scene, you'll also notice that it does impact the vibrance. For, in my opinion, the positive. You can really extract a lot of richness, again, because it's going to be blocking a certain amount of highlights. But do be careful, because as we've talked about in prior videos, in food photography, we love our specular highlights. So don't kill your highlights altogether. Don't strive for that, because there's nothing more magical than that. Just a little bit of sparkle that comes off the tomatoes or the citrus. You know, don't kill that. You want to keep some of that, but there's a nice little happy medium, a happy balance. So that's where you just kind of rotate it, figure out what's the sweet spot, and rock and roll. So more or less a very simple little piece of equipment, though, that can have a big impact on your images. Although, as I've said before, on plenty of these other videos having to do with gear, this is not a required piece of equipment. You can definitely get the job done without filters, but when you're in a situation you're like, ugh, these highlights are killing me, the reflection, the glare, oh, this can really just simplify your life. So hopefully you learned a thing or two. Certainly if you have any questions or any other thoughts about using filters, any ways that you've liked using them in the past, feel free to leave those down in the comment section below. If you're shooting with filters, feel free to tag me over on Instagram. I'm at The Bite Shot. I'd love to see what you're working on. And so with that, I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you stay out of trouble, and I will see you again here real soon, okay? Bye.